Ron and Lily appeared to be the perfect couple. He had always adored her confidence, charm, and ambition. Lily, in turn, appreciated his kindness, attention, and calm demeanor. Their home was cozy, with a large kitchen where they loved to spend evenings cooking dinner together, and a living room where they watched TV shows, snuggling under a single blanket. Ron worked remotely, managing a small IT business, which gave him flexibility and allowed him to spend more time at home. Lily held a managerial position at a large company. Her schedule was tight, and her demands were high, but she always made time for Ron. However, in the past few months, something began to change. Lily was staying later and later at work, justifying it with urgent projects. She had started carefully choosing outfits even for regular workdays. Her wardrobe was filled with new dresses and accessories, which she wore with an enthusiasm that was unusual for her. One morning, as Ron sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and his laptop, Lily appeared in the doorway. She was wearing an elegant blue dress, complemented by silver earrings. "Where are you going all dressed up again?" Ron asked jokingly, glancing at her over his laptop. "To work, of course," Lily replied, walking to the mirror to adjust her earrings. Ron smiled and stood up to approach her. "Work is one thing, but you look like you're heading to the cover of a magazine. Is there some secret competition for the title of most stylish bosses going on at your office?" Lily laughed, but her laughter was slightly forced. "It's just an important meeting with clients," she said, continuing to adjust her hair and avoiding his gaze. "A meeting? Ron crossed his arms and narrowed his eyes. "You've been staying later and later for these meetings. Is it now company policy to work late so nobody has time to go home?" Lily turned around and looked at him with a slight smile, trying not to show her irritation. "It's not like that. Right now we have a complicated project, and I need to be at the center of it all. You know how it is when you need to prove your worth." Ron shrugged. "Yeah, I know. I just miss you. That's all. You used to always find time to call or text, but now." Lily approached and placed her hand on his shoulder. "Sorry, Ron, I promise it's just temporary. Everything will settle down." He nodded and gently took her hand. "You're beautiful, as always," he said, looking into her eyes. Lily blushed slightly and looked away. "Thanks, Ron, but I really have to go," she quickly said, pulling away and heading for the door. "We'll see each other tonight. Love you," she called as she closed the door behind her. "I love you too," Ron replied, but she was already gone. Left alone, he stared thoughtfully at his cup of coffee. Their conversations had become shorter, her attention seemed to drift away more often. "It's just stress," Ron reassured himself. "She has a lot of responsibility. She just needs time." But the unease wouldn't leave him. He began to wonder why his once perfect life suddenly seemed so fragile. One morning, after Lily had left for work, Ron noticed her forgotten phone on the nightstand. It was unusual. Lily never went anywhere without her phone, especially lately. He glanced at the clock and thought she'd definitely be back for it soon. She'll come back for it, Ron thought, but after half an hour, Lily still hadn't returned. He decided to call her to let her know, but as soon as he picked up the phone, the screen lit up with a new notification. It was a message from someone named Carl. "Thanks for last night, you were amazing." Ron felt his heart freeze, then race faster. He stared at the screen for several seconds, as if trying to convince himself that it was some mistake. Maybe it's a joke, or just a colleague, he thought. But his inner voice told him otherwise. His mind started to piece together events that once seemed normal, but now they began to look entirely different. A minute later, a second message from Carl appeared. "I can't stop thinking about how you laughed. You're so beautiful, Lily." Ron felt his palms sweat. He tried to convince himself not to read further, but couldn't look away from the phone. Everything felt too intimate, too personal. A third message came in just a few seconds later. When can we meet again? We have a meeting today, but I want something more. Ron sat down on the bed, feeling his blood rush to his temples. These messages were too personal, too explicit to be just a colleague's conversation. Ron closed his eyes, trying to find any possible explanation that could justify it, but nothing came to mind. He couldn't pretend anymore that he didn't see what was right in front of him. The phone vibrated, signaling an incoming call. It was Lily. "Hey, Ron," she said, in a calm, even slightly cheerful voice. "I think I left my phone at home. Did you happen to see it?" "Yeah, I saw it," he replied, trying to sound normal, though his heart was pounding like a hammer. "Do you want me to bring it over?" "No, don't worry about it, everything important is synced. I'll pick it up later," she quickly said, and there was something in her voice Ron couldn't immediately place. Maybe it was anxiety, or was she just calm because she knew she wouldn't be caught? "How's your day?" Ron could barely focus on her words. His voice trembled when he replied, "Not bad, how about you?" Lily hesitated for a moment, then answered, "Everything's fine, a little hectic, but I'm managing." "All right, Ron, I have to go, love you. And I love you," he answered, but she had already hung up. Ron put the phone back on the nightstand and stared at the wall. Her voice had been too calm, as if she was purposely trying not to give anything away. Her behavior felt too artificial. He could feel doubts growing in his soul. Then, the phone lit up again, another message from Carl. "Don't forget, I'm waiting for your smile today." Ron jumped, feeling the blood freeze in his veins. Those words made his heart tighten once again. He couldn't pretend anymore that everything was fine. This wasn't just a colleague. This was someone who was gaining her attention, someone she was spending more time with than with him. He quickly scrolled through the conversation to the very beginning and saw several messages he hadn't noticed before. The first, "You look just as gorgeous today. Shall we meet tomorrow?" The second, "With you, it's like magic. We have something special." Each message that followed grew more explicit, more personal. Lily and Carl were discussing their meetings, planning evenings together, but there was no mention of Ron being involved. A lump of pain and rage rose in his chest. He knew he couldn't just sit back and wait. He had to know the truth. Ron realized that something might have changed in their relationship, but he had still hoped it was just a coincidence. But now, holding these messages in his hands, he couldn't lie to himself anymore. In the evening, when Lily came back home, Ron stood at the door, his eyes hidden behind a mask of calm. He knew the conversation with her would be decisive, and now, he had no choice but to find out the truth. In the evening, Ron decided to conduct an experiment. He suggested to Lily that they spend the day off together, but, as always, she eagerly declined, citing an important meeting. Ron, trying not to reveal himself, nodded and agreed, though inside, he was seething. He knew that if he wasn't with her today, he would never get the answers to his questions. When Lily left, Ron felt the tension grow. He couldn't just sit at home and wait, not knowing what was happening. Thoughts of Carl and their messages swirled in his mind, and he realized that if he didn't find out the truth now, he wouldn't be able to live with himself. On the day of the meeting, Ron took his car and decided to follow Lily, staying hidden in the shadows. He was determined to find out who she was really meeting. He knew it would be difficult, but he couldn't leave it to chance. Lily parked at a cozy restaurant on the other side of town. Ron stayed far off, watching her get out of the car and walk inside. He wasn't mistaken. Within minutes, Carl walked out of the restaurant doors. They exchanged glances, and Lily immediately hugged him. It was a long and warm embrace, as if they hadn't seen each other in a long time. Ron felt his heart tighten. He stayed hidden, not knowing what to do. His mind searched for excuses, but his emotions spoke for themselves. "Are you out of your mind?" he whispered to himself. "This can't be true." She couldn't. But Carl responded to her embrace with the same passion as she did, and all doubts vanished. Ron felt his fingers tighten around the steering wheel. He didn't know how to react. There had been a moment in his life when everything felt right, and now he was standing before a reality where everything was crumbling. They entered the restaurant, and Ron couldn't take his eyes off the scene. All his suspicions began to take form. He remembered how Lily had said she was at an important meeting, but her meeting with Carl looked nothing like a business meeting. There was a fire in her eyes that hadn't been there when she talked about her work. Her laughter, her sincerity, her confidence, it was all not about work, not about colleagues. He saw how they behaved as if the whole world had disappeared, and it was just her and him. Ron took a deep breath and made his decision. He couldn't stop now. He couldn't just walk away. He waited until they finished their dinner and quietly followed them until they left the restaurant. His thoughts were swirling. He tried to hold himself together, not letting anger or pain take over. Carl and Lily were laughing and talking as they walked to the car. But instead of getting into their cars and driving off to their separate homes, they headed toward a hotel. That was the final blow for Ron. He froze when they reached the entrance, and in that moment, it felt like his world collapsed. He saw Lily and Carl enter the hotel, hand in hand. His lips went dry, and the blood ran cold in his veins. He stayed hidden, unable to move, until they disappeared behind the doors. Now I know for sure, Ron thought, a cold dread enveloping his soul. Everything he had suspected turned out to be true. Lily, his wife, with whom he had shared so many years, was not only unfaithful to him, but she had entered into a relationship with someone else. He felt his heart contract, and everything inside him fell apart. His mind was filled with questions that had no answers. Why? How could she? Ron returned to the car, his heart pounding heavily. He was crushed, but he knew he couldn't continue living in ignorance. He no longer knew what to do next. Too many unanswered questions. He decided that he couldn't hide from the truth any longer. It was time to confront the situation and talk to Lily. His thoughts swirled in his mind, but one thing he was sure of: I need to talk to her. At that moment, all his confidence in their relationship, all his love for her, wavered, but he knew he had to face her and get the truth. The next day, Ron invited Lily to talk. He felt he could no longer stay silent. It was time to lay everything out, otherwise, the lie would continue to destroy him from the inside. Over dinner, after they ate in silence for a while, Ron, keeping his gaze fixed on her face, said, "I saw how you spent your meeting yesterday." Lily froze. Her face turned pale, and her gaze became disoriented, as if she was trying to find a way to avoid this conversation. She put her spoon down and sighed. "What do you want to say?" Her voice was tense. Ron could no longer hold back. He already knew this was a conversation that couldn't drag on. "Did you really think I'd never catch you? I followed you, Lily. I saw you meet with Carl. I saw you both leave for a hotel together." Lily couldn't meet his gaze, lowering her eyes. For a few seconds, she sat silently, her shoulders tensing, but it seemed like she couldn't hide the truth anymore. "Ron, I can't deny it." Her voice was barely audible, and she looked at him with tears in her eyes. "It was wrong, I know. I shouldn't have done it, but I felt so lonely. You became so cold, and I didn't know how to fix it." Ron shook his head, his heart tightening in pain. "Lonely," he repeated, his voice trembling. You talk like I was a stranger to you. I tried, Lily. I tried to support you, to be there for you. I don't understand how you could do this. Why didn't you tell me when it was hard? We could have talked. Instead, you started seeing him. Carl. Lily looked away, then met his eyes again. She pressed her lips together, but continued. I'm not trying to justify myself, Ron. I know it was a mistake, but it happened because I gave in to my feelings. Carl, he was there, he listened to me, he understood what I was missing. I felt like he cared about me, and I couldn't stop. Ron felt his chest tighten, as if all the air in the room had disappeared. The pain of betrayal pierced him through. So you left me not only emotionally, but physically too? He asked, unable to hide the bitterness in his voice. Lily paused for a moment, her eyes filling with tears. She nodded but didn't say a word. The answer was clear, and it was even more painful than Ron had imagined. I can't believe this. You didn't even try to save our marriage. You chose him, chose this affair over us over me. Ron jumped up from the table, his hands starting to shake. Lily jumped up, trying to stop him, but he pulled away, not wanting her touch. You don't understand, Ron, she said, her voice breaking, and she started crying again. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you, but I just didn't know what to do. I couldn't keep living like this, and Carl, he gave me what I was missing. Ron stepped back, feeling like his world was crumbling. He didn't know what to do, how to react. The pain of betrayal, resentment, and disappointment was tearing him apart from the inside. You want me to believe this is all because you were lonely? His voice was full of sarcasm and bitterness. You're telling me that feeling desired was that important to you? What about me? Wasn't I important to you? We've been together for so many years. Lily looked as if she were about to crumble under the weight of her own words. I can't justify myself, Ron, her voice was quiet. I was wrong. I realize it now, but I needed time to understand that. I don't know how to fix this, but I love you. Please, don't leave me. Ron took a deep breath and turned to her, saying, I don't know what will happen next, Lily. I need time to figure out if I can forgive you. If I can trust you again. He turned and headed for the door, feeling his heart breaking. Lily approached him, her hands reaching out, but Ron pushed them away. Ron, please don't leave, her voice was full of desperation. I can't live without you. I need time. I'm willing to do anything to fix my mistakes. Please. He paused for a moment, then, without turning around, he said, I can't make a decision right now, Lily. I need time to figure out what matters more to me, loving you or protecting myself from the pain. Everything I thought I knew about us is now in question. Lily stood there, clutching a chair, her eyes full of tears. I know what you want to say, her voice trembled, but I can't live like this. If you leave, I'll lose everything. Ron looked at her one last time. Maybe that's already happened, he said, and as he walked out of the room, he slammed the door. Ron couldn't control himself anymore. His voice grew louder, and what started as a calm conversation quickly turned into a full-blown storm. Lonely? Are you serious? You betrayed me with some guy named Carl, and now you're trying to blame it on loneliness. Ron slammed his fist on the table, causing Lily to flinch. Ron, she started, but her words got lost in the whirlwind of emotions raging inside him. No. You're not going to justify this. You tell me you felt lonely, but at the same time you go off with someone else. You think I'm going to believe you? Lily raised her hand, trying to calm him down. Ron, wait, I couldn't control it all, it's not like you think. Ron cut her off, not letting her continue, confused. Then let's call your Carl and see how the two of you untangle this mess. Ron grabbed his phone, and without waiting for her response, he dialed the number. "Get over here, now, we're talking," he said coldly, not trying to hide his fury. Carl on the other end of the line tried to resist, but Ron, not wanting to waste time on words, cut him off. "Are you coming, or do I have to come get you myself?" An hour later, Carl arrived at their house. He looked tense but tried to keep confidence in his voice. When he entered, Ron was already standing in the hallway, with such a look in his eyes that Carl knew, this conversation wouldn't be peaceful. "You thought it would be this easy?" Ron started, not even letting Carl get a word in. "You're destroying someone's family and just going on with your life." Carl clenched his fists but tried not to lose his composure. "I didn't want this, Ron, it was a mistake. I was weak, and," Carl tried to explain himself, but Ron didn't listen. "A mistake," Ron shouted, his face burning with anger. "You just went and destroyed my life. What you did is called betrayal, Carl. You came here, took what was mine, and walked away. You didn't even think about how this affects me." Ron grabbed a family photo from the shelf and angrily threw it on the floor. "This is my life, my family, do you understand? And you decided you could just take it." Carl tried to step forward, his face hardening, but Ron stopped him again. "You have no right to be here, Carl. You have no right to interfere in my relationship. You don't even deserve a glance from me." Lily, who had been standing off to the side, couldn't stay silent anymore. She looked at Ron, her eyes filled with tears and pain. "Ron, please, stop," her voice trembled with desperation. "This won't help. We can't resolve this like this. You can't go back in time, and Carl, he's already understood his mistake." Ron turned to her, his eyes blazing with fury. "He understood his mistake. He took everything from me, and now you want me to feel sorry for him." His words hit her like a knife. Lily took a step forward and extended her hand, but Ron sharply stepped back. "Don't touch me," he yelled, his voice growing even more tense. "You loved him, Lily. You were with him, and now you want me to forgive everything." Ron glanced at the photo he had just broken and felt his heart tear. It was the moment he realized that his life, his love, his family, all of it had been an illusion. Carl felt the situation slipping out of control and hurried toward the door. "You're right, Ron, I was wrong," Carl said quietly. "I'm sorry, I never meant to hurt you." But Ron couldn't respond. He stood there, his hands trembling, a dark emptiness spreading inside him. Carl quickly left, and the room was filled with silence, broken only by Lily's heavy sighs. She approached Ron again, her eyes full of tears. "Ron, please," her voice was barely audible. "I don't know how to fix this. I love you, I realize everything now. I didn't want this. I didn't know how to handle it." Ron looked at her. His face was like stone, his eyes filled with pain, but he was still able to say, "Maybe it's all already destroyed, Lily." His voice was cold and resolute. "Maybe I'll never be able to forgive you for what you've done." Lily couldn't respond. In her eyes, fear, desperation, and regret reflected, but she didn't know what else to say.